The first stage of the trial looked ordinary on the outside. But as the test takers started making headway, they noticed it became harder and harder to move forward. At first, the path was fairly leveled. But the further Feng Li went, the more hilly it got. He wasn't sure if he picked a poor route or if all of them were like this. But regardless, it was too late to backtrack. The only thing he could do was to continue forward. He used the bamboo shoots as leverage to help him navigate up the forest. Slowly but surely, he was making progress in the stage. All he could think of was to put one hand in front of the other and one foot in front of the other. It reminded him of farming, where it was also extremely repetitive. It might be thanks to the medicine he got from his uncle or the training his brother had given him. But he still felt like he was in good shape. Coming to the end of the bamboo forest, it became even more difficult since most of the shoots were too small to grab a hold of and the ground had turned into mostly rocks. Climbing the last few meters out of the bamboo forest, Feng Li was greeted by a vast expanse of rocky hills. But to his small frame, they might as well have been mountains. Looking up, he saw some of the kids had already made their way to the top. He didn't know how long it had been, but seeing how far some of the other contestants were, he didn't dare to dally. He quickly made a mental map for himself and began the trek forward once more. Unlike the bamboo forest, the ground here was rough and had sharp rocks littered the ground. One misstep could result in a cut on the soles of your feet. Feng Li could already see some rocks coated in fresh blood. He had to take his time. The shoes that he owned would not be able to handle the sharp rocks. He remembered that some of the wealthier kids actually had thick soles on their shoes. No wonder some of them were so far ahead. A third of the way up the hill, Feng Li started breathing heavily. Another thing he learned as a farmer was to never work too fast and overexert your body. You could do more if you took it slow and steady. It was like how he was able to jog for a longer period of time than running and cover a longer distance as well. Looking around, he found a large rock. Making a small detour, he reached the rock without many issues and sat down. He began to catch his breath and rest his aching muscles. Feng Li glanced down at the senior that had been trailing him all this time. Although the ground was rocky and steep, the disciple was standing carelessly in one spot, coolly observing him. The green robes were still pristine and free of dirt. Feng Li was curious at how this person was able to traverse the terrain so nonchalantly. He knew firsthand how hard it was. The more he stared at the senior, the more he felt a fear starting to creep up his chest. Suddenly he heard some grunts coming from just below him. This broke him out of his trance. After the short break, he was feeling much better and was ready to tackle the rest of the obstacle course. This stage was admittedly much harder than the bamboo forest in the forest. Feng Li was able to use the chutes as handholds. But here, he wasn't sure which rock was stable enough for him to use. Several times he thought he had a good grasp of a rock, but it turned out to be too loose. If he fell, would the senior behind him actually rescue him? As the trial continued, the path forward had gotten more difficult. At the same time, the heat started to affect them as well. It was nearing the summer solstice. On a regular day, most people would stay indoors and come out in the evening to finish up their work. While the morning was cooler, it had evidently gotten hotter. After the first break, his progress slowed to a crawl. He had underestimated his energy expenditure and his muscles started to protest. He had to take several breaks before finally finishing this part of the exam. In the last stretch up the mountain, he heard a few boys calling it quits. Each time he thought he was at the end of his reserves. He dug a bit deeper and thought of the hardship his family has faced. He could change their fates if he could complete this test by the time he reached the top of the mountain. His body was filled with small cuts and scratches, especially on the sole of his feet. At some point, his shoes had given up and basically disintegrated. Arriving at the last phase of the challenge, he raised his head and noticed the 13-year-old had already completed the course and was at the top of the mountain. Looking at the position of the sun, he was sure that he wouldn't complete the exam by noon. There were ropes that were dropped down from the top of the cliff with some already occupied. The cliff was at least 50 meters tall, and if he fell from that height, he would be seriously injured. But he was reminded of what Division Head Zhao said about the green robes. How they would protect the contestants from any real danger. Evidently, this was not the case anymore. This last phase was only for those that are willing to risk their lives. In the couple of minutes that he stood there, he had already seen a few boys slip and fell. Although their injuries weren't life-threatening, that was because they hadn't gotten too far up the rope. Fang Li selected a rope that no one was using and steeled his mind and began climbing. But he didn't get far before his hands slipped, rendering all his progress null. Fang Li looked up one more time and thought to himself how he was going to make it up. At this rate he would be stuck here forever. His gaze met the 13-year-old's. He didn't know what to expect. But the other boy just gave him a thumbs down. He was suddenly filled with righteous indignation. How dare this silver spoon brat mock him? He had all the unfair advantages one could wish for in this exam. The background, age, the shoes. Fang Li now had another goal in mind. Not only was he going to make his parents proud but also one day suppress this unnamed youth. Taking a calming breath, he began his climb anew. This time he made sure to make use of the knots on the rope. They had been there for a reason. The anger didn't blind him. Instead, he channeled it as fuel for his movements. 5 meters, 10 meters, 20 meters, 40 meters, 50 meters. Fang Li didn't know how long it took him to finally complete the last part of this exam. But he did it. He reached the top. As soon as he did, he collapsed into a heap of mess. After Fang Li reached the top, a green-robed disciple came over and gave him a pouch of water. Good job, junior brother. You made it. Even though it was said out loud, he could hardly believe his ears. He actually did it. Fang Teng knew that this was a long shot. Most people who actually got into the 7 Stars sect came from strong family backgrounds and had the youngsters trained for several years. He didn't have much hope for Fang Li to join. But maybe his nephew could gain some experience and pass it down to the next generation. If he was here right now, he was no doubt be bouncing up and down with joy. As for Fang Li, he was too shocked to take the water skin that was in front of him. Seeing the state the young boy was in, the green robe man wasn't angry. He just smiled and remembered how he was just like this boy when he was first told of the same news. Putting the water skin in Fang Li's hands, he moved back to his group with the division leader and protectors. Division Head Zhao waited some more time, and seeing that no more applicants would make it up the cliff, he announced the end of the selection exam. After hearing that, the green robes moved out as one and gathered everyone that hadn't made it to the top of the cliff. I am happy to say we have another 9 people from this batch joining our sect. The 7 of you did very well and completed the course before noon. But out of this group, Mo Yi did the best, completing the challenge in record time. You will be directly sent to the Stars Division to learn our sect's secret skills in martial arts. It wasn't until now that Fang Li learned the name of this silver spoon boy. As for the other 6, you can follow me to my Zhao division. Lastly, the 2 of you, although you both passed, it took too much time and will be outer court members. I have read your records and both of you are under the age limit. Try again next year and you might be selected to join the inner courts. Protector Wang, take care of these 2, pointing to Fang Li and the other boy that didn't complete the exam in the allocated time. And give the rest of the children some silver coins and send them back to their homes. Division Head Zhao instructed. Yes, Division Head. Quote. The group of boys was led down the cliff once all the instructions were given. Fang Li could not help but steal a glance at Mo Yi and found that he was still talking with the old man in a dark green robe. He's different from the rest of us. He has the skills and backing to be a core disciple. Only core disciples are sent to the Stars Division. Once he completes his training, he'll likely be ranked a protector. In his lifetime, he even has a chance to become an elder, a step above division leader. The voice belonged to one of the boys that had passed and become an inner court member. Fang Li could hear a hint of jealousy mixed in with the boy's tone. He was unsure how to best respond, so instead he just nodded and agreed with the boy. Another newly minted inner sect disciple spoke up as well. HMMPH. Mo Yi is nothing special. Everything he has is from family connections. If it wasn't for his older cousin being married to sect leader Situ, there will be no way for him to be a core disciple. He is already above the age limit, but he still gets all the recourse from the Stars Division. How shameless. Quote. The first boy quickly said. Are you mad? How dare you talk about the sect leader? We don't know enough to judge. There might be other reasons as well. Either way, you need to be careful of what you say. All martial artists have extremely good hearing. If one of the senior brothers hears this, you will definitely get expelled. You would be throwing away the opportunity you just got just so you can say a few words. Totally not worth it. Quote. Fang Li agreed with the second boy. Although he also disliked Mo Yi, especially his actions during the exam, he wasn't going to speak up about it. After the warning, the first boy also stopped talking and continued to follow the protectors and division leader. When the group finally reached the bottom of a mountain, they entered a forested area. To one side of the road sat an old man. From his appearance, Fang Li judged this man to be in his late 60s with wrinkly yellow skin and a head full of graying hair. As he got up from his seat, it looked as if a strong wind would blow him over. Division head Zhao was the first to see the old man as he was in the front. He warmly greeted the stranger. Just from his actions it could see that this old man wasn't simple. He was at least a peer to a division leader. The senior disciples also greeted the old man and they did so with a bow. Dr. Wu, how are you feeling today? Is there anything we can help you with? Asked division head Zhao. I'm much better but still recovering from my cold from last week. Are these the latest batch of disciples? Quote. Yes. The 7 are newly minted inner court members. And the 2 in the back are for the outer court. There's also an outstanding talent this year that was already sent to the Stars Division. Very good. Good seedlings are always in short supply. Coincidentally, I am also in need of some manpower. This old bag of bones can't handle the workload anymore. Once I am gone, we would need another doctor in the sect as well. So it would be a good time for me to train someone. Dr. Wu, please don't say that. You still have a long time with us. But please go ahead and have a look. If any of them fits your needs, just take them. We can also call over the other batches we already tested. No need to call them over. The old man scanned the group of boys and his eyes briefly twinkled. When he saw Fang Li and one of the inner court disciples. You come forward. I'll take these two. Haha. Of course. Brother Wu. Please take them. They must have done some great deals in the past life to meet your requirements. Quote. Fang Li and the other disciple, Wan Zhu, split apart from the main group and followed the doctor. In Fang Li's mind, if this person is also respected by the division leaders and he was now his apprentice, then that means his own standing in the sect had just increased. The old man took slow and steady steps down a small road that led through the forest. At the end of the path, there was a luscious valley with a strong aroma of medicinal herbs. It reminded Fang Li of the herbs that his uncle had given him. On the right side of the valley sat a courtyard. At first look, it was for growing herbs. As they entered, Fang Li noticed several plants that he had never seen before. On the other side of the valley, there were multiple houses. Looking around, he noticed that there was no other formal exit except the gateway from which they had just come. This is where you will be staying as my apprentices. The sect calls this the Ghost Hand Valley, but I think it doesn't suit it with all the vitality here. Pointing to one of the buildings. For now on, this will be your home. Rest well. I know the selection process must have been hard for your young bodies. When the two of you are rested, come find me over in that building over there. I have some things to tell you. The two of you can call me Old Wu or Dr. Wu. Whatever suits you. The two boys did not stand on any ceremony and headed into the house. Each picked a bed and dozed off. As Fang Li fell asleep, he was content with making it into the sect and possibly even an unofficial inner sect disciple.